Hello there, everybody. Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of the Sheehan Show. And today I'm going to look back at a very interesting weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. I want to talk about a couple of topics and a couple of kind of standout things that happened over the weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. Obviously, we had the massive KSW fight. I want to talk about Roberto Soldic in a second. And I want to talk about a few topics from the UFC card as well, which obviously saw Derrick Lewis win in the main event and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson win in the co-main event. But there's one thing I want to talk about before I get into all of those, and it's illegal / slightly illegal, maybe, strikes in the world of mixed martial arts. And I think sometimes, right? So I'm a big advocate, as everyone knows. I talk about judging, and I'm a big rules nerd and stuff like that. And I would be more of an advocate for not taking points than taking points. I think we need, and I would also be an advocate for, evolving the rules, that we have different ways of penalising fouls. If someone eye pokes someone and it tears the eye out of them, absolutely still take a point. Or if there's 5 eye pokes in a row or 5 groin kicks in a row or whatever it might be, absolutely. I'm not an advocate for no point taking, but within reason. But last night there was 2 different strikes we're going to talk about. The first one was the Dante May's groin strikes, and when I say groin strikes, I mean strikes with his groin. And then there was the Ricky Simon groin strike with his shin at the very start of the fight. The first one, the Mays one, I think that's fantastic. Someone actually asked me on a Q&A a few months ago. His name is IB Freely, which is kind of a bit of a pun, a few months ago about that, because there was a fight that something similar sort of happened, and they're like, should people attack that more and use it more? And I remember kind of half joking at the time saying, yeah, they should. But then you see something like that, and it's like, well, why wouldn't they? There's a cup there. There's a weapon. It's not a legal strike. It is something you can use to your advantage. And in MMA, over the last few years, and always, I suppose, but in the last few years especially, with the progression of the sport, that little bits, 1% makes a lot of a difference. Why wouldn't you use something like that in that position? Look, it makes it makes the person uncomfortable in terms of they're getting pounded in the face. 2, it makes them uncomfortable because they're getting pounded in the face with a dick, basically. So why wouldn't you do it? The name of the game is to make your opponent uncomfortable. And why wouldn't you try to make them as uncomfortable as they possibly could be in that situation? So strikes like that, I think people should do that. Now, it's not an illegal strike, so I shouldn't be bunching that in with the way I started this. But what I would say is, I think it's something to be maybe looked at, to whether using the cup like that should be illegal. Now, I think it should. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but it's definitely maybe a discussion that they need to have with the ABC and things like that. The other strike that Ricky Simon landed, which I watched the fights back this morning, and I'm pretty sure it was like it was the first strike of the fight, because Michael Bisping or maybe Brendan Fitzgerald actually said it. They're not warmed up yet. No, it's in the first 5 or 6 seconds of the fight. At least we can kind of restart the fight and start again. That one to me looked as clear and a mint strike as it possibly could be. Like, he came up, went right down the middle with his shin straight into the cup. Like, there's no turn on the leg to kick the inside of the calf. There's no, like, let's say if it was a front kick to the face or coming right up through the middle, or a teep to the body, and his opponent Assuncao walks into it and he just catches him. Bad timing. I didn't see any of that. The Leon Edwards Belal Muhammad fight, where there was the eye poke, I think it was really bad timing. One guy moved one way at one stage and the other guy moved the other, and it landed. That can happen. It can happen with strikes all the time. But this one, to me, I think, like, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Ricky Simon will come out here and give out to me. I think he came out and just said, "You get one for free. Let's take it." And he just kicked him right upside the balls and took that shot for free. And what's going to happen? Like, the referee comes over and he goes, "Oh, I know you didn't mean it. You caught him." Goes over to Assuncao, he didn't mean it, and he goes back to Simon and he's like, "Oh, Assuncao, he even knows you didn't mean it." It's like, Well, what if he did mean it? You know, why should we immediately rule out someone throwing an illegal strike illegally? Why should we rule that out? Like, it can happen. Now, I'm not saying, and I'm very much not saying, because I'm an advocate for the other way around, that every illegal strike should be an illegal strike, and none of them are you know, you get your first warning in the dressing room. I hate that sort of stuff. But when it's so obvious, when it's so clear like this, I think a point should have been taken straight away there. I think he meant it. I think he should have got serious warnings, and I think it was a very obviously bad groin strike with no attempt to land on the legs whatsoever. So that, to me, that was one of those things, those egregious things I said in the weekend. And actually, I went to sleep last night. I watched the fights on the way back, or on Saturday night, and I watched the fights in the morning. So maybe there was a bit of back and forth about it online on Twitter and stuff, but I didn't see any of that, obviously. But yeah, I just think that was really bad, and that was my first kind of takeaway from the weekend. My second takeaway, I want to talk about Derrick Lewis for a minute, because anyone who watched my betting show knows I gave Daukaus as my bet. And not that I ruled Derrick Lewis out or anything, but I was pretty confident in it. Now, I don't think Daukaus fought the best fight in the world. Let me just say that first. I think he had some leg kicks that were there, and he stopped throwing them, or didn't throw enough of them, didn't go for any takedowns, didn't try to clinch up with Derrick Lewis. Well, I thought it was a bad performance from him. But I want to leave that to the side for a second. But I think it was a great performance from Derrick Lewis. Like, those both things can happen. One guy can fight really well, and one guy can fight really badly. And that's what I think we saw here from Derrick Lewis. And like, I was a guy down through the years who maybe didn't give Derrick Lewis enough credit, who saw him coming into the UFC, and he was a very, very average fighter. He was just using his maybe massive frame and his inability to give up, and his heart and his will and his power to win fights. And, you know, he got to a certain level, lost, you know, got back to a certain level, lost again. But now it feels like he's gotten to a certain level, at a higher level than that, and is sticking at that level. Because sometimes we rule, you know, even me at the weekend, like, I didn't rule him out per se, but I thought Daukaus would win. And like, why didn't I pick Derrick Lewis to win? Like, didn't most people pick Derrick Lewis to win? Why was Daukaus the favourite here? Like, Derrick Lewis has proven it down through the years. He is in this conversation. Like, Derrick Lewis is one of the best heavyweights in the world. Okay, he mightn't be Francis, or he beat Francis, but, you know, he mightn't be Ciryl Gane, he mightn't be John Jones or Stipe Miocic, but he's really, really good. You know, I was talking about, if Daukaus won this, he'd be the next in line after that, you know, the trifecta, or the four lads there I just mentioned. Now Derrick Lewis has put himself back in that conversation, and it's not that put him back in that conversation. He should be in that conversation always anyway. Okay, he lost to Ciryl Gane, but he won, 5 fights before that? He's won another one now. Like, we need to start giving more respect to Derrick Lewis. And also, it's not just about wins, because it's easy to be a scoreboard journalist, as my good friend Ken Early once said. It's easy to be that, and it's easy to be, you know, to talk about people on their wins and their losses. But I think Derrick Lewis has improved as a fighter over the years, and he is way better now than he was before. Actually, initially, when he adjusted to become maybe a more technical fighter and less of a brawler, I don't think it worked for him. I just don't think it worked for him. I think he was better off being a brawler. I think he was better off, and you saw that points in these fights. He just, well, this is not working, let's give it up, let's go back to brawling, and it worked for him. But he stuck to that over the last 3 or 4 years. He stuck to his improvements in his game, and even when it wasn't going right, even when it wasn't maybe the best thing to do at certain points in certain fights, he has stuck to it, I think, in his preparation and in his game planning over the last few years, and it's now paying off for him. Whereas I think Derrick Lewis, okay, he's not a Gane or a John Jones in terms of technique and all of that, but he's a way, way better fighter than Derrick Lewis 5 or 6 years ago. And those switch kicks that he throws, though, you know, the way he can land these power shots, I think his cardio is a lot better now. I think he's a serious athlete now in terms of the preparations he does and everything. I think Derrick Lewis is really a shining light about what you can become if you have a really good base. Whether it's, you know, a base skill or a base athleticism or a base power, with a stick-to-itiveness that'll get you to a place with the right kind of backing, with the right mentality to get to that right place. And I think Derrick Lewis's performance over the last few years, and again on Saturday night, have been tremendous. Have been really, really tremendous. As I said, okay, he's not a Jones, he's not a Gagne, he's not an Usman or a Demetrius Johnson or a Khabib Nurmagomedov, maybe in terms of what he does, but he fights a very, very smart, intelligent Derrick Lewis fight with a more technical aspect to his game than he had before. It's not just going out winging, it's not just going out brawling. It is waiting to pick that shots, drawing lads in. Look what he did to Blades when he went for that. When he went for the takedown, coming in with the short uppercut, landing it, knocking him out. Look what he did against Daukaus, knocking him out up against the cage when Daukaus was kind of holding back and waiting. And he was, as well, when you're looking at Daukaus, it's like, why didn't he go for the takedown? That was probably the question everyone is asking themselves. We probably didn't go for the takedown because of what Derrick Lewis did in his last fight with the aforementioned Curtis Blades. And those things matter, and when you have that in your arsenal, it makes it tough for the next guy to do that. So fair play to him. A really, really great performance from Derrick Lewis, a guy who is no longer just a brawler. He is now a legitimately good fighter, and I'm glad to see it. As someone who's maybe criticised Derrick Lewis in the past and maybe talked down about Derrick Lewis a little bit, I think it's time to talk him up now, because I think he's good. Now, as I said, okay, he might never beat Gagne or Jones or Miocic, but do you know who else never won championships? Joe Lozon or Diego Sanchez or Cowboy Cerrone or, fighters down through the years. Dustin Poirier gave in the intro. Those are still very, very good fighters. Very, very good fighters. And do you know what? So is Derrick Lewis. So fair play to him. Right, I'm going to move over to KSW and I'm going to circle back then to Wonderboy for a while. I want to talk a little bit about Roberto Soldic. What a win over Mamed Khalidov. I did the preview show here talking about it, and he fulfilled, I think, what everyone thought he could do. He came out there. I thought Khalidov made a great fight of it, to be honest. He was light on his feet for a 41-year-old. Find me a more athletic 41-year-old, and I think you do a good job. Okay, maybe Yoel Romero, but still, the way he was moving, how he was so quick on his feet, I thought he looked really, really great, Khalidov. He was tiring Soldic out. I spoke about that in the preview. If he could tire him out, it might be a big, big part of it. And he was trying to do that. Obviously, Soldic moving up and went and put on a lot of muscle for this fight. And Khalidov was landing some nice shots. Soldic was landing shots of his own. I'm not saying it was all Soldic or anything, but from Khalidov's point of view, it was really, really good, I thought. And I think he was trying to play the long game. But Soldic is just such a good fighter. His ability to land shots, that body kick, that left hook is unbelievable. And make no mistake about it, this guy is one of the best welterweights on planet Earth. UFC, no UFC, Bellator, PFL, KSW, Cage Warriors, it doesn't matter. This guy is one of the best in the world. And the power shots that he landed on Khalidov, a lot of people wouldn't have taken even a few of them, but the final one was absolutely fantastic. But I just want to talk about before what that happened to that, and now after, maybe what's next. I thought Soldic was maybe tiring a little bit, and Khalidov's game was paying off. And there was like maybe a 15 to 20 second sequence of Soldic throwing shots, Khalidov moving out of the way, and in the middle of that, I was like, oh, he's tiring, he's tiring, his muscle is getting to him, Joe Rogan would be roaring, and if he was doing the commentary for KSW, he'd be shouting, no, he's getting tired. And then he knocked him out straight away. So that middle of that 15 seconds, it was like, oh, okay. And it was an unbelievable thunderous left hook knockout with a couple of shots for good measure after it that were, they were probably necessary, because you never know with Khalidov, he was knocked out, but you would never know he could bounce back up, and it was absolutely fantastic. That power, that accuracy, that Soldic, if you've never seen him fighting before, that's what he is. That's exactly what he is, and moving up to middleweight as well. I'd like to see him back down at welterweight if we move forward and see what's next. He's talking about light heavyweight and being a three-weight champion. Look, if he's staying in KSW and he's staying in KSW for the next 3 or 4 years, I would be in favour. Go up to light heavyweight, get that belt there, then do what you want after that. I think the biggest issue for him, though, if he isn't staying at KSW is, and you know, if he maybe wants to go to the UFC and try to be a UFC champion, is if he does go to light heavyweight, it's going to be very, very hard to get back down to welterweight, because he's a big muscular guy. Might be the tallest guy in the world. He can make 170 perfect. But if you put on the amount of muscle he did to get to middleweight, then you're putting on even more muscle to get to light heavyweight. That's going to be a long way down from 205 to 170 if you put on muscle to get there. So, look, if it's long-term in KSW, no problem. He can fight at light heavyweight, maybe work his way back down to welterweight again. But if he's signing for the UFC, if he's going to fight for the UFC, if he's moving over there, which he might not. They're paid a lot in KSW. Khalidov never went, and he was paid a lot, and he's very happy. Look what he's done in his career. It's been fantastic. So that's not assured whatsoever. But if that's what he wants to do, I think if he is staying in KSW for another fight, you either stay middleweight or move back down to welterweight. I don't think the 205 idea is great if that is your situation. Now, I would never advocate for a man to go and take less money to go and fight somewhere else. The exact same thing with Ray Cooper I spoke about a few weeks back. But I would still love to see Ray Cooper fight against some of the best guys in the UFC. I would still love to see Soldic fight against some of the best guys in the UFC. Will the UFC pay them to come over? I don't know. You know, no is probably the answer to that. We probably all know the answer to that is no. But I would still love to see it. Like I tweeted out there on Saturday night, Sean Brady versus Roberto Soldic. What a fight that would be. Two absolute tanks who hit hard, good ground games. You know, Sean Brady with his big takedowns and his submissions and his power, and Soldic's power. I think that would be an absolutely perfect matchup, and I would love to see that. What a fight. And, you know, Soldic all the way up to the champion. I would love to see him fight all of those lads in the welterweight division. So, look, whatever happens, I hope Soldic gets as much money and paid well as possible. Best case scenario, I would like that to be in the UFC against all those best guys, but if he fights in KSW for the next 5 years and has all those challenges, I'll be happy enough as well, because there's some very, very, very good talent in KSW, and there will continue to be as well. So, Roberto Soldic stand out from the weekend. If you haven't seen that, make sure to check it out. I tweeted out the knockout over at Assuncao NBA if you want to see it there. But the full fight is worth watching as well. Very, very good fight. Fight of the weekend. I said it last week on the show as well. I know other people were saying it online after that as well. Fantastic fight and a fantastic event as well. KSW do great things. The last person I want to talk about here is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And as everyone knows, like down through the years, maybe if you're following me and stuff, I've been a big kind of fan of Wonderboy. I just like his style. I like the way he fights. I like the way he carries himself. He's been a very, very good fighter down through the years, but it's very unfortunate that I think we've reached the end of Wonderboy as a top competitor. I know he came out afterwards in the press conference and he says he still has title aspirations and everything like that. But I think there's a sad reality when you get to a stage in your career where it's built on speed, dexterity, and movement. And when you can't circle off that cage and stop the takedown with your feet, you're finished against anyone who's good like Belal Muhammad. Now, I think a few years ago, look, Belal Muhammad fought Wonderboy. Wonderboy would have been a huge favourite, and even with Belal's improvements, and take nothing away from Belal, this is about Wonderboy for a second. I'll speak in other places about Belal. I think he's a very, very good fighter. Maybe not the most exciting performance in the world, but that's maybe a chat for another day. But I think Wonderboy would have taken care of someone with that skill set a few years ago, even now, if he had his own skill set from a few years back. But he's had a lot of miles on the road. You know, he's had a lot of kickboxing bouts. He's older now maybe than you expect. You know, he's kind of a baby face, but he's well into his 30s. And he got to the very top of the mountain, and you don't stay at the very top of the mountain for very long in mixed martial arts. If you get there when you're young maybe and you haven't much taken, like a John Jones, you can stay there for a very, very long time. Like someone like a Glover Teixeira or a Blachowicz or someone like that, when they're older, they're not staying there for a long time. We all know that. They probably know that themselves. It's very unfortunate though when you're someone like Wonderboy, when you, for I think a few years, were the best welterweight in the world. You know, that lost to Tyron Woodley and the draw, he should have won one of those fights. I think we all know it. He decimated Rory McDonald. He was the best welterweight in the world for a while. And the fact that you've never met that, you know, you've been the best welterweight in the world, but you've never held the title, you've never touched that gold. and now you're on a place where you never will. That's very, very sad. And, for someone who's a big fan of Wonderboy, and I'm sure for his other, his fans and his family and everything like that, it's a very, very, very sad situation. But it's also the reality of mixed martial arts. People always talk about the Hall of Fame and things. And as someone Irish, I don't really understand Hall of Fames that much. It's a very American thing. But when I look at it and I think, like, what's the difference between a Hall of Famer and not a Hall of Famer? It probably is that. Like, is Wonderboy a Hall of Famer? Probably not, If he had got that decision against Woodley and defended his title a couple of times, and had big fights, would he be a Hall of Famer? Maybe he would, yeah, But it's very, very tough. It's a very, very tough situation. And the reality of a dog-eat-dog world that you're going to get here, and the reality of a world where you there's no hangers on, there's no people who win a title when they shouldn't win a title, It very, very rarely happens at the end of your career anyway. Like, it happens, say, for a guy like Michael Bisping or something like that, or Glover Teixeira, but the way they won it was kind of like, Michael Bisping was still a very, very good fighter. Like, I don't think Michael Bisping was out of his prime at the time he won it, just like we weren't expecting Michael Bisping with his skill set maybe to beat some of the guys. Glover Teixeira has kind of had a renaissance in his career, and I think, like, the experience and the old head on him actually suited his skill set. Whereas Wonderboy, he is a young man's skill set. Let's be honest here. He has a very, very young man's skill set. You can't have reflexes and speed and footwork like that when you're 50, You can have that when you're 25. And then there's someone in the in-between bits like Wonderboy right now. And it saddens me to say it because, as I said, one of my favourite fighters of all time. But that's where he is right now in his career, and I unfortunately don't think it's getting any better for him. And it's a very, very sad thing to say. So, like, those are my takeaways from the weekend. Derrick Lewis, really, really good performance. We need to start talking about him in a more positive light. Wonderboy, unfortunately, I think this is the end of the championship road for him, or the contendership road anyway. Roberto Soldic, one of the best fighters in the world outside of the UFC, and maybe hopefully inside of the UFC very soon. And those illegal / maybe not illegal strikes as well were my kind of takeaways from this massive weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. I'll leave it at that. Lots of more shows coming over the Christmas period. I'm gonna do some little look aheads to next year, looking at some fights I want to make next year, maybe talking about some Irish people who I'd like to see in the UFC and have big fights next year as well, and a little bit about Conor McGregor. So I look forward to all of that over the next few weeks on Sherdog.com. And I'm Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you all next time.